Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Historical Boxing Society podcast. Today's video I am doing on the very first heavyweights. So to me, a heavyweight will be over 190 pounds. As we know, in the 1920s, Dempsey fought at 188 pounds, and in the 50s, Rocky Marciano also fought at 188 pounds. So to have a fighter over 190 pounds in this very early stage of gloved boxing is a rather large individual for the time period. As I'm going to show a photo here of John L Sullivan and Jake Kilrain. These are not them in their prime. As you can see, a very portly John L Sullivan who had weight issues throughout his career, and John L Sullivan with a very large waistline, looking very much like Santa Claus in this photo. Now we're going to go through all of the beginning heavyweights up until James Jeffries. We're going to stop right around when Jeffries is launched as a need a cutoff point. So we're looking at the very first gloved heavyweights. Before we start going through these heavyweights, I just want to give a quick mention to one of the very first true heavyweights that I think of in the boxing history. He was more of the bare knuckle variety, but he stood same height as both Peter Jackson and Frank Slavin, 6 foot 1.5, 190 pounds, just the exact same height and weight as those fighters. And I'm talking about the great John C. Heenan. And he, of course, was known for getting the victory over Tom Sayers in the bare knuckle days. And Heenan toured for a short time with Jem Smith, and he was one of the very first fighters that I think of that are really a real, true, big, burly, scary looking heavyweight, especially back in the bare knuckle days, as he had a big beefy frame and was a man of a rather mean disposition. And he's the very first heavyweight that comes to mind when I think of the very earliest heavyweights. So now we're going to go through the very first gloved heavyweights. Starting with launch dates, and all these launch dates will be in the 1800s. So 1878 would be William Miller, 1 year before John L Sullivan. William Miller, 5'10", 191 pounds. William Miller is one of these two fighters that started their career as a wrestler turned boxer. William Miller was for a short time the Australian heavyweight champion, as he got that crown from Larry Foley. And he didn't have that much of a boxing career. He was kind of a teacher, professor, and of course he did exhibitions all throughout the 1800s with various boxers, as they did boxing tours. Next, we have the very next year of a launch date would be John L Sullivan. Sullivan's weight was 229 pounds. He stood 5'10". And Sullivan fought the Marie Giant and Herbert Slade. August of 83, he got a TKO victory in round 3. The total weight of that match was 406 pounds total. He then went on tour with Herbert Slade for at least a year, and finally in 1887, he fought Patsy Cardiff in a 6-round draw. Now that holds the highest weight mark record, tied with another match, 414-pound total. So Sullivan, Cardiff, 414-pound total, which was number one, even more than Gus Ruhlin and James Jeffries. Next, we have the very same year, 79, Mervine Thompson. These are one of two Thunderbolts. Mervine Thompson was the Cleveland Thunderbolt. He stood 5'11", 210 pounds. So over the 200 mark. Some of these fighters are muscular, as you get to go through the visual illustrated history and see the beefiness of these fighters. Thompson fought C.C. Smith, which was a 414-pound total. Again, tied for the number one spot with Cardiff and Sullivan. He won a 8-round KO over C.C. Smith in 1884 with multiple knockdowns. 1886, he got a victory over a DQ over Pat Killen, which was a fluke win as he was knocked down repeatedly. And fans entered the ring, and that were supposedly of Killian's friends, and he got disqualified for doing that. And the end for him as he lost every match afterwards, post the Pat Killian match. So he had a rather uneventful heavyweight career as the Cleveland Thunderbolt. Next, we have C.C. Smith, the Black Thunderbolt. He stood 5'11" and a half and weighed 205 pounds. He got a 6-round draw with George Godfrey in 1885, and he went into retirement post-sporadic fighting. He also fought way later George Gardner, and in his 40s, the year of his age, in his late 40s, and he faced Jem Smith also, who was another fighter on this list. C.C. Smith, the Black Thunderbolt. Definitely a very well-developed, not flabby, lean heavyweight. Next, we have the same launch year, 79, Jake Kilrain. Jake Kilrain, he stood 5'10" and a half and weighed 190 pounds. Kilrain really never had the frame of a real heavyweight. He's only made larger weights, being dramatically out of shape. He got an early victory over George Godfrey, and finally, he faced at 190 pounds. He fought Joe Lannon in 1887 and got himself a draw. And he fought fat and flabby. He fought James Corbett at 205 pounds, which was way overweight for him, at least 15 pounds. In 1891, he lost to Frank Slavin. In 1895, he also lost to Steve O Donnell, other fighters on here. Also in 1887, he fought Jem Smith for the world title, and this was London prize ring fight, and the total of that fight was 356-pound total, so not even close to going over the 400 mark. Next, we have the Marine Giant, Herbert Slade. He stood 6'1", weighed 201 pounds, so just over the 200-pound mark. He was discovered in a deep area of New Zealand. Marine was of the Polynesian people living in New Zealand. He fought for the world title in 1883, with John L Sullivan. When he came over with Jem Smith, the total of that match was 406 pounds as we got ourselves over the 400-pound mark. He then made a touring exhibition with John L Sullivan, and he supposedly later tangled with Denver Ed Smith. The next fighter we have on the list is launched in 82. Denver Ed Smith, 5'10.5", same as Jake Kilrain, 190 pounds. He was barely over the cruiserweight mark at 190. Smith was from the UK in 1890. He fought Jackson, which was a 370-pound total in that match. And by that time, he fought Goddard. Both were cruiserweights in 1895, a match he won with an 18-round KO over Joe Goddard, earning himself very prestigious honors at that point in history. Next, we have the launch of the same year, Frank Slavin in 1882. Frank Slavin, he stood 6'1.5", 195 pounds. Slavin and Peter Jackson were both identical in height and weight throughout much of their career. Slavin was a real heavyweight, as he did not look anything like Jake Kilrain. He was a much bigger dude. You know, the extra couple inches fills out his body considerably better, as he is a beefy heavyweight. And he did what John L Sullivan could not do, in that he knocked out a prime Jack Burke in 3 rounds. Sullivan had 6 rounds to knock out Jack Burke and was unable to do it. And he also fought William Miller in 1889, and he destroyed Joe Mcauliffe in the year 1890. Then again, he destroyed Jake Kilrain in 1891 during his invasion from Australia. And he should have fought James J. Corbett next, but Corbett was dodging quite a few boxers at the time. Next, we have the same launch year, 1882, 6'1.5", 190 pounds. We have Peter Jackson, same height and weight as Slavin. Peter Jackson beat Jem Smith in 1889. He also beat Denver Ed Smith in 1890. And he got a draw with Joe Goddard, and he beat Frank Slavin in one of the super fights in the beginning of the 1890s. Next, we have the launch year of 84. One of the other wrestlers in the countdown, Jem Smith. He was a wrestler much like William Miller, short and stocky. Jem Smith, 5'8.5", 190 pounds. So obviously, being a 5'8.5", he's going to be incredibly beefy for that short of a frame. Smith excelled at the London Prize fighting rules, and he fought Jake Kilrain 100+ rounds in the year 1887. And Smith fought many people under various different circumstances, from London Prize rules to bare knuckles to gloved matches. He fought all 3, including wrestling. So four different ways he was fighting as he made his impact on boxing. So next in the years 84 through 86, we have the launch of the American class of fighters as we get 5 heavyweights of varying degrees of skill. We go through these 5 heavyweights as the heavyweight scene in America was pretty slim, as we're going to see. These are the best that America had to offer at the time, which wasn't very spectacular. In 83, we had Pat Killen. 84, we had Joe Lannon. 84, we had Patsy Cardiff. 85, we had Joe Mcauliffe, the one true, real big dude of the 5. And in 86, we had Mike Conley. These were the main guys used to combat the Australian invasion that was happening, some of which had almost no impact against the Australian fighters. So we start with the 1983 launch date, Pat Killen. Pat Killen was 6 foot 1.5, 195 pounds. Killen was far and away the most promising of this bunch, as he just destroyed Patsy Cardiff in 1888. And Cardiff had fought for the heavyweight title in 86, 2 years previously, got a 6-round draw with Sullivan, as I stated, in which Sullivan hurt his hand and didn't really get a chance to do much with Cardiff. Pat Killen, he had a long string of victories. He had 47 wins in 1889. The next year was the super bout between Joe Mcauliffe and Pat Killen, whom Killen had to travel to the West Coast to fight Joe Mcauliffe, where everything possible went wrong for him, as he had very bad success in his super match with Joe Mcauliffe and ended up losing that match. Next, we have a 84 launch, Patsy Cardiff. Patsy Cardiff was 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. The only one to fight John L Sullivan, who at the time was only 28 years old. Sullivan was only 28 years old. And he fought Sullivan in 1887 to a 6-round draw, and then Killen to a 10-round draw. The rematch was the very next fight, and he got smoked by Pat Killen. The total in that match between Killen and Cardiff, 366 pounds. So not quite to each fighter being 200 pounds, which would be 400 pounds. He then fought Peter Jackson in a tough match in 1889 as he arrived from Australia. And he fought Joe Mcauliffe in 1889, and Mcauliffe won that match. That total for that match was 409-pound total. So now we're getting a little bit somewhere with some little bit bigger fighters. In 1885, we have Joe Mcauliffe. Unlike the others, Mcauliffe stood 6'3" and 1/2, 220 pounds. As you can see by this very early cartoon depiction, he had big, huge tree trunk legs, as he was undoubtedly a true heavyweight. He beat Conley in 1888, a 402-pound ring weight total. He then beat Pat Killen the following year, setting up a Police Gazette title match versus Frank Slavin in 1890. 394-pound total. He got completely steamrolled by one Patty Slavin. Then in 1891, Mcauliffe versus Cardiff 409-pound total. Mcauliffe beats him with a 15-round win. Then faces Joe Goddard in 1892. He loses by a KO in 15, and then he fades away after that fight. So he fought Frank Slavin, Joe Goddard, and Peter Jackson. So Mcauliffe was doing his part trying to defend the esteem of America against the Australian fighters. Next, we have 1886 Mike Conley. Mike Conley, 6 feet tall, 192 pounds. At one point, a Pacific Coast champion. He got a nice string of victories, and then he got steamrolled by Joe Mcauliffe and stated he was going to quit after the match, which his retirement lasted for about a year, as he had a rather uneventful ring career, but Conley did have a little bit of beef to him for the time frame. Next, 1884 launch, we had Joe Lannon. Lannon was widely known as John L. Sullivan's sparring partner. He met Pat Killen in 1885. Killen was down repeatedly, and in 1887 he met Jake Kilrain. Kilrain won an 11-round TKO, finally setting up a huge match in February, a 15-round draw with Old Chocolate George Godfrey, a match in which John L. Sullivan was in the corner for one Joe Lannon, his sparring partner. 2 years later, they fought, and a 27-year-old Joe Lannon, past his prime, loses badly to George Godfrey in the rematch, as without a doubt that Godfrey was the master of Joe Lannon. Next, we have 86 launch date, boxer Steve O Donnell. 6 feet and 1/2, 190 pounds. He later became the sparring partner for one James J. Corbett. He came over in 1893. He fought Jake Kilrain to an 8-round draw in 1895. Months later, he got a rematch, and O'Donnell won with a 21-round TKO over Jake Kilrain. He faced Slavin in 1886 in Queens and won, a very faded Frank Slavin. And he finally faced Gus Ruhlin in 1897 in a 10-round loss. In 1899, he faced Jake Kilrain, TKO win in 5. And he later even fought Twin Sullivan in the year 1903 at the age of 37 years old, way past the launch date of 1886. 1903 is far past that point. So next we have the boxer Joe Goddard, 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, a cruiserweight. He got a rather late launch at 31 years old. In October of 1890, he fought an 8-round draw with Peter Jackson. He invades America 2 years later, and his first fight is with Joe Mcauliffe, as I stated, 15-round win via KO. In the next year, 1893, he got a big match with Denver Ed Smith, and he lost by KO in 18 rounds. And Joe Goddard finally became the South African champion in 1895 at the age of 37, and he defeated Denver Ed Smith in 1896 with a 4-round win. Eventually, at a very age 40 years old, he fought James Jeffries. a ring total of 395-pound total. And Goddard was way past his prime at that point and lost the match to Jeffries rather uneventfully. So next we have one of the last two fighters on the list here. 1893 launch date of Gus Ruhlin. He was the second big dog heavyweight after Joe Mcauliffe. 6'2", 200 pounds. The Akron Giant. In 1897, he beat Steve O'Donnell. Months later, he fights James Jeffries. A 412-pound ring total to a 20-round draw. In 1899, he fights Joe Goddard, 5-round win TKO. And finally, he gets a rematch with James Jeffries in 1901. And the ring total, 418 pounds. The highest mark recorded so far is 4 pounds over Cardiff and John L Sullivan. And he ends up losing that match. 6th round, retired between rounds, loss. And in 03, he fights a 15-round draw with a brand new heavyweight known as Sandy Ferguson. As just after these Gus Ruhlin and James J. Jeffries, they will launch some of the new heavyweights such as Peter Felix and Sandy Ferguson. Finally, we have the last heavyweight on the list here, launched in 1895, James J. Jeffries, also a true legitimate heavyweight, 6'1.5". Jeffries fought at least over the 200-pound mark various times in his career. He was 6'1.5", the same as Peter Slavin and the same as Frank Slavin and Peter Jackson. In 1897, he fought a 20-round draw with Gus Ruhlin, as I stated. In 1898, he faces a severely faded Peter Jackson and Joe Goddard. And finally, the next year in 1895, he wins the title with a win over Bob Fitzsimmons as he becomes the future heavyweight champion, James J. Jeffries. The ring total for the Fitzsimmons versus Jeffries bout was 373 pounds. So not even close to the 414-pound mark of Gus Ruhlin and James J. Jeffries. So those are the quick history of the very beginning of the first heavyweights of the gloved era, and the illustrated photos for each of these boxers as we do a brief history on what was the very beginning heavyweights in the gloved era. Thanks for listening. This is the Historical Boxing Society podcast. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a thumbs up, and thank you for taking time to listen.